I titled my talk today, How to Approach Your Time in College, but the title is a little misleading because the real title is How to Become More Free and to Use College to do that. In some ways, high school will be a continuation, college will be a continuation for high school for you, but it will also be a radical departure from what you experience now. You will be free to wake up at 1 p.m. if you want, to skip classes with no real consequences, to choose classes that you will then skip, to never clean your room, and if you're lucky enough to not live with your parents, to just simply not listen to anything that they tell you to do. The question for you is how to use that freedom meaningfully, how to harness the power to change your life, to become free, and to change the world. I want to state the obvious now, which many people talk about, which is that it's very easy to be cynical about college. While college is a powerful way of social mobility for those without privilege, it also tends to perpetrate economic and social inequality. And yet everything I say today, even while acknowledging that college is a privilege, applies to any kind of college. It applies to college and prison, which I've taught at. It applies to community colleges. It applies to classrooms everywhere. It applies to non-elite and elite colleges. Let me start with the bad news, and I'm going to keep this short because you guys all know it. Unprecedented burdens fall on your shoulders. There is indisputable proof of ecological disaster. Species are going extinct. Villages are underwater. Russia has invaded Ukraine. China has incarcerated 1 million Uyghur Muslims, some including children, without trial. The United States has 5% of the world population, but incarcerates 25% of the population. Meanwhile, people seeking a better life, migrants, encounter barbed wire fences and heavily armed police when they try to cross to a new country. They encounter routes where they can drown, starve, or die of thirst. This is the world that you inherit. So what is the good news? The good news is that young people all over the world, especially college students, also high school students, are the soul of social movements. Young people, especially college students, have agitated against imperialism, against apartheid. They have toppled regimes. They have stopped wars. They have organized human chains of protest in Eastern Europe in 1989 and 30 years later in Hong Kong. Why are young people so often the soul of social movements? In the 1960s, the sociologist Charles Payne wrote about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, about students no older than you who traveled down south to register disenfranchised African American voters. He says that the dramatic imagery that we often associate with these movements, such as police dogs and fire hoses being unleashed onto people, tend to fail to take into account the patient work of student organizers. The student who took a local person 11 times to the voting test until she passed. The student who went back over and over to a frightened farmer to convince him to register to vote. The dramatic imagery that we associate with these movements tend to undervalue the patient, sustained effort, the slow, respectful work that make these dramatic moments possible. But back to this question, so why are young people the soul of movements? Why are people like you the soul of such movements? You care less about status and reputation. You have less to lose. You have less to fear. You're ready to get up and go, to travel where you feel there's need. You're ready to sleep on floors and couches. You're less easily worn out. You don't take the status quo for granted. You can smell it when an adult is rationalizing suffering. You do not accept the rationalization. This is your power as young people. And this is the power that you can cultivate now, but especially in college, when you have total freedom. Václav Havel, who spent 5 years in prison as a dissident and then became the president of Czechoslovakia, talks about the power to live in the truth. Why is college a place where you can live in the truth? No other place lets friendship sprout so wildly, so spontaneously, from a shared love of ideas, of books, of art, of weird things, of philosophy. No other place besides the free press holds liberty as its express aim, liberty of thought. No other place besides maybe the monastery or church nourishes the spirituality of the inner life. As Havel put it himself, and I love this, he says, the inner life is where propaganda dies, where we carry memory and complexity and ambiguity. What is it to live within the truth? It is to refuse consumer seduction, to refuse totalitarian logic, to refuse to be demoralized. It means to practice solidarity with those who are dead, those who need you. And a note about solidarity. First is that we all are in Taiwan, and I think that gives us a unique perspective on solidarity. We don't have the luxury of the world knowing who we are. We thirst for international recognition. I hope that wherever you go to college, if it's outside of Taiwan and people ask you where you're from, you'll be able to say Taiwan with some pride, to use that power. Asian Americans, and I know this because I used to be one of those people, tend to dislike it when people ask where you're from. But since moving to Taiwan a year ago and observing my husband who's from here, I've seen the power of feeling proud when people ask where you're from. So first, Taiwan is a unique place to experience solidarity. And second, about solidarity, take a lesson from Robin D.G. Kelly, who said solidarity is not a market transaction. You don't give solidarity to somebody because they gave something to you. You give it because it's right, because you know they need it, because you believe in a project of mutual liberation. And that might mean that they never care about where you're from or who you are, and that's okay. Let me pause for a second to give you some practical advice, because I know that if you Google, what should I do about college, you see all these other things, you'll be like, why did Michelle tell me that? Okay, I'll do those really fast. First, get to know at least one or two professors. Go to their office hours. I never did that. I didn't know how to do that. Try to find at least two professors who care about you, who know who you are. Drop classes that don't interest you. Trust your instincts. If you keep with a class that you don't like, you won't do well in it, and you won't enjoy your time. Keep looking for friends who get that you're weird, who love your weirdness. Those friends will be with you for the rest of your life. If you don't find them at first, you will find them. Join organizations, extracurricular service, church communities, new things that interest you, that you find meaningful, things that maybe you wouldn't have done in high school. You'll also find friends there. And last, and this is where I'm transitioning from the utilitarian back to the impractical, believe that you have a gift. Every person in this room has a gift. Some of you know immediately what it is, and some of you are wondering, what is mine? The trick to finding your gift is to look for where you feel absolutely capable of concentration, of giving away your attention. That could be really different for each of you. It could be when you're listening to a friend, or it could be working on a math problem. But that gift is what you were put on this earth to do. And if it's different than what your parents tell you, remember you don't owe your parents anything except to pursue the gifts that you were given. Let go of that guilt. One last thing about concentration. the mystic Simone Weil talks about how if we bring the concentration that we bring from prayer to the aspects of our life that we love, we can transform ourselves, we can transform our world. It is that gift that opens us up to others. It is that gift of concentration that allows us to say, what are you going through? And it's that gift that we can practice, especially in a setting where we are free to pursue our interests, our loves, and our choice of friendships. Okay, I'm reaching the end of this talk, and I just want to share a few stories from college students that I've met during my, I think, many years as an educator, but also as a professor at the American University of Paris. I'm just going to share with you 3 journeys that I saw college students go through, and that I hope that you too can go through during your time. The first is a Malaysian Indian student whose parents did not want him to study the social sciences, so they refused to pay for his college tuition. How did he pay for it? He worked at a gas station until he saved up enough money, and then he came to college armed with one philosophy. Throughout this talk, I've given you different values that might ground and anchor you throughout your life, especially when you lose hope. But you don't have to necessarily obey those values, which include solidarity, truth, friendship, inner life. For him, what drove him forward was his own experiences that he had volunteering at a restaurant where food was given for free to anybody who wanted it. This includes homeless people, migrant workers, and undocumented people. The philosophy of this restaurant was, you deserve to eat. No matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, you deserve dignity. And what gave him strength was an idea in Sanskrit, which he translated for me, which goes like this: the guest is God. I love that, the guest is God. The second student whose journey I found remarkable was a daughter of Haitian immigrants. When her mother was a baby, just 3 months old, her father, who was an outspoken critic of the Haitian regime at the time, was arrested, tortured, and disappeared. The student's grandmother, who lost her husband and never found him again, dreamt that one day she would make it to the Sacré-Cœur, to the Notre Dame church in Paris. And so when the student came to Paris, she went to each of these churches and thought of her grandparents. It was her family history that drove her in her life to make something of herself. The last student, who's the daughter of a Greek and Mexican couple, was quiet and shy. She came to my office hours, go to office hours, and told me that her greatest fear in life was to live without purpose. I tried to help her find purpose. I took a group of students to volunteer at an immigrant detention facility in Texas. And it was through some of these experiences that she grew brave. Right now, she's working at the Florence Project in Arizona, one of the leading immigrants' rights organizations. And she told me a story of a young man no older than her who had been detained, arrested, and spent 7 months in immigration jail. He grew so hopeless that he wanted to abandon his case and get deported. And through patient, sustained effort, she and her fellow colleagues helped to get him out. She visited him at the Greyhound station where he boarded a bus from San Antonio to New Orleans. She brought a backpack full of water, snacks, masks, and toiletries. And he said to her it was the first time in 7 months that he had breathed fresh air. He's going to be attending community college soon in New Orleans, and for now, he is free. All of these stories of students, they can be your stories. They will be your stories. They're stories of what the capacity for attention, for reflection, what the desire for transformation can bring to your life and to the world. There are stories about why young people are soul of movements. And there are stories I hope that guide you both now in your time in high school and your time in college. Thank you so much for the privilege of being here, and good luck. And feel free to stay after if you have any questions.